Welcome everyone to our first Living Wage and Income Lab session of 2022. And right now we are in Amsterdam, live in Amsterdam from Fairfood office in Amsterdam to discuss business practices that truly benefit farmers and farm workers in achieving living wages and incomes. Before we start the question, please allow me to mention just two things. First of all our guests today, we are tested and we passed the test. So we are all negative, COVID negative today. And the other thing is that we are recording this session, and after the session, you will get an email with a screener from us. My name is Baram Sadeghi, and I have the great honor and maybe greater responsibility to be your moderator, your host. Today, I am a journalist, writer, and as you can hear, English is not my first language. As a matter of fact, as someone who came to Holland when I was 18 years old, I have no idea what my first or second language is. But enough about me, because we have a great program today for the next hours. In a few moments, I'm going to invite our three speakers here in Amsterdam, our other speaker far from here to this session. But before that, I'm going to start with Isa Miralles, the living wages and income lead at Fairfood, to tell us more about the lab. Isa, take it away. Why are we here? What's the idea behind it? And what's the goal of today's session?
Thank you, Baram. And thank you everyone for watching today. For those that are new, the Living Wage and Income Lab, it's a space where different stakeholders from the agri-food sector get together to discuss their work on living wages and incomes, and to share the lessons learned and to innovate together. This is a really important part of Fairfood's work. We've been doing this for the past 5 years, because we have we work with traceability in order to get transparency and decent livelihoods in supply chains, and with a very big ambitious goal of democratizing the world of food. And this is impossible without collaborations and without innovation. So that's why we do this type of events, to create partnerships. And for example, this event today and this year, they will be organized thank you to the Reclaim Sustainability Program, which is a 5-year strategic partnership from the Dutch government, Solidaridad, and other NGOs in the Global South to create inclusive value chains.
And when we are talking about Dutch government, we are talking about the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, I assume.
That's correct.
So that's the first session. Can I assume that there are more sessions are coming?
Yes, indeed. We have around 3 or 4 a year. So,
Okay, cool. And what's so special about this session, or the lab in general?
Well, I think it's really special that finally we're getting a sense of urgency to achieve, to build supply chains where the food producers have a decent quality of life. This is not a nice to have, but this is, we're talking about eradicating poverty for the people that produce our food. I think this is crucial for the future of the food supply and for the future of our planet, actually. And also it's nice to see that in the European agenda, legislation is coming up. So we have the due diligence legislation where companies will be responsible for the social and environmental impact of their work. So I think, it's coming together, urgency is seen, companies are here to talk today, and I just really hope we all can get very inspired and get together to keep this journey.
I hope so. Deo volente. Okay, Isa, thank you for your introduction. Now you are leaving this set. You're going to stand over there, and in a few minutes, I'm going to ask our 3 guests to come here with me. So thank you so much, Isa. You are going over there, and I'm going to sit over here. Okay, and so I'm going to tell you something more about our agenda today. Today, we will start our live cast in a few seconds with an expert on the field of inequality, who will provide us an overview of effective interventions for companies to realize living income in their supply chains. And after that, as I said, we will have 3 people here over there from different agri-food companies. They will talk about their initiatives, but also the things that are not, maybe they haven't been working, because then we know really what's working not, or as they call it nowadays, the challenges, I would say problems, challenges, the challenges they are facing. And so if you think, okay, for the next hour, I'm just going to sit and just drink my Fairfood coffee. No, it would be great if you participate with us. Please do participate with us. And you see the chat session. Please go to the chat session and send your questions to the chat session to us. And please address your question to one of the speakers, so it will be easier for me to give it to them. Having said that, now I can see that our director is saying that 110 people are watching right now. Thank you all for watching. And as I said, please go to the chat and send us our question. And while you are, I'm going to ask my three guests to join me here. Please, Monique, Paul, and Lotte, would you please sit over here? And I have a question for you, dear viewers. Yes, thank you very much. Please sit here. You have your coffee and or your water. Okay, that's my coffee. So just to get to know you, who are you? Where are you from? So I have a question for you. Are you working with a company, with an NGO, with the government? So we have a couple of questions for you. If everything goes according to the planning, now you see the different options. Please give us just an idea about the people who are watching us, and in a few moments I will see the different types coming up. Having said that, let's start. Monique Moy, Mark, who is with Eosta, and Lotte Kijk, who is with Fairtrade Original, and Paul Schoenmakers, who is with Tony Chocolonely. And right now, from far from us, from 6,340 kilometers, Uwe Neiting, who is a senior researcher at Oxfam, and he's the author of a lot of papers, special on global inequality, and he's joining us from Ghana. And in the hope that everything technically goes according to the plan, I hope so, I'm going to give the floor to Uwe, because he's the author of the paper Living Income from Right to Reality. As I said, he's with Oxfam, and he will tell us in a kind of presentation for the next 5 to 7 minutes the key findings of him. So, Uwe, take it away.
Thanks a lot, and hello everybody. Great to be here, and great to see so many people on this at this event. I hope you can all hear me okay. Can I just get a quick confirmation? Yes. Very good. I hope you all can also see my screen. Very good. Before we dive in, we thought it'd be useful to just share a couple of foundational thoughts and issues on the concept of living income, just to make sure we're on the same page. I'm assuming most people on this event know the concept, but just to make sure we're all aligned. So we of course define living income as the net annual income a household needs to earn in order to afford a decent standard of living, and that needs to cover costs of such items as food, housing, health, education, and unexpected events. Now, one kind of issue that we keep coming across is the distinction between living wage and living income, and it's important to distinguish those two terms, right? The living income concept comes out of the living wage movement, and some of the methodologies are actually quite similar, but the important differences, and one of the key differences is that living wage covers more kind of the hired labor aspect, while living income is more focused on independent producers, mostly in agriculture, but also the source of the livelihood differs, right? On living wage, we're looking at employment, and living income, we look at more market transactions. The last item, just on this kind of foundational level, I want to highlight is just that living income has multiple sources, right? So, and because of that, there are multiple factors that affect farmers' ability to earn incomes, and there are multiple barriers they can face. So there's not one pathway to living income, and that's, I think, important to keep in mind. Now, let's dive in. So where are we on living income as a community, and where kind of, what's the status quo that we kind of find ourselves in today? For us at Oxfam, our perception really is that we are in a somewhat of an inflection point. We have been engaging on the issue of living income for over a decade now. We started a big campaign almost 10 years ago where we asked companies to engage on the issue and commit to it. And we've been really impressed by how much of a momentum we have been seeing over the last few years, especially, right? At the same time, right, as it often happens when an issue kind of goes mainstream and gets more attention, things also change, right? The way people interpret the issue, the way they implement it. So we really feel like this is a bit of a critical juncture with a lot of opportunities, but also some risks. And more specifically, right, what we are seeing right now, if we look at the landscape, and we did a kind of thorough review of what are some of the big food and agriculture companies are doing on living income, actually, we had some kind of overarching findings. One is that we see a lot of companies, actually almost all companies, engaging on living income, seeing it as a key issue in their supply chain. Yet we see very few commitments, right? Very few commitments to say, look, we commit as a company by this date to have a living income achieved for the farmers in our supply chain. In terms of implementation, we see a lot of pilots, right? We see a lot of projects, but we don't see necessarily the impact at scale or even the programs at scale that we would like to see. We're seeing a lot of analysis, all right? There's a lot of focus on measurement. What are the income levels? What are the income gaps? And that's very important. But we don't see, and only more recently, I think we're seeing more attention on what are the actual solutions, what works to close the income gaps, and what should companies do. We published, based on this analysis, we published a paper last fall, and we laid out a lot of recommendations for companies where we think they should go in their living income journey. And I'm going to bucket these real quick here in kind of 4 critical areas for companies. So the first one is really around how companies should approach living income. And it's really the importance of integrating living income in their core business practices, right? What we currently still see oftentimes is that companies approach living income on a project basis, right? It's a bit of an add-on, kind of a nice to have kind of approach, right? And that, of course, then translates into kind of sustainability projects at the farm level, right? A lot of focus on productivity, on income diversification, right? Which are important levers for income, but they're insufficient, right? And what's really missing is kind of this more inward-looking lens about how does a company, through its own practices, shape farmers' ability to earn incomes. And procurement is really the key element there, right? It's the business function with most leverage over farmer incomes. Pricing is a big component here, of course, but also kind of the more general trading relationships that companies have with farmers. So our recommendations is that really companies should take living income and approach it as part of their human rights due diligence process, right? Which just provides a more structured approach, helping companies to think through their own impacts and contributions to farmers and their income. The second piece is around inclusion. And that is really something we've been seeing more and more, including here in Ghana and cocoa, but in other sectors as well, right? Where living income really very much is kind of relies a lot on averages, right? And we kind of risk losing the significant diversity that farmer populations have in terms of income levels and capacities. So what companies oftentimes do, understandably, right, is what we call creaming from the top, right? They engage in their projects with the farmers that are most easily reachable, most easily or more likely to adopt certain practices. So they're the better off farmers that oftentimes are participating in living income strategies and programs. Now, what happens, of course, is that almost risks to widen the gap between the better off farmers and farmers that are more vulnerable or more marginalized in supply chains. And even going a step further, we're even seeing the risk that companies might be achieving their living income objectives, not by raising the incomes, but by simply consolidating their supply chains and pushing the poorest farmers out of the supply chains. That, of course, can be the purpose and can be the end goal. So what we really want companies to do is to do a thorough segmentation of their farmer population and to develop tailored strategies to their farmers that, you know, according to farmer needs. And the same is true for women farmers, right? Many, because living income sits kind of at a household level, oftentimes it brushes over kind of gender differences and income generation. So we really encourage companies to take a more gender sensitive lens to their living income work. Right now, we're seeing oftentimes when there's a gender focus in living income, it's oftentimes on alternative livelihoods, right? There's a lot of women here in cocoa communities that make soap now, for example. And those can be profitable potentially, but we also need to address women's barriers to income generation in the cash crop sector themselves. Number 3 is the issue of power, right? And here, this is, you know, a sensitive subject, of course, but for the most part, we're seeing farmers still being pretty much sidelined in a lot of living income discussions, right? They don't participate or their representatives in meetings like, including this one, right? We don't see companies necessarily doing thorough consultations with farmers around their living income strategies, right? And yet they carry the burden of change, right? The change has to happen at the farm level, right? According to many companies. So you have that that power imbalance of who decides and who carries the risk and burden. And we really would like to turn this upside down, right? And what about farmers actually being able to tell companies what they need to change in order to for farmers to have a better ability to earn higher incomes? And that kind of power imbalance, that's not just, you know, limited to living income discussions, but also the broader participation, of course, in supply chains, right? I think we're all aware, you know, of the power imbalances that exist, right, between kind of a very fragmented farmer base and kind of a very consolidated buyer base. And we really encourage companies that as part of their living income strategies to also think about how can they increase the bargaining powers of farmers, right, through strengthening cooperatives, but also supporting farmers in upgrading in higher value added activities, which can be helped in the bargaining power. Last but not least, we need to think beyond the company level, right? Living income still remains kind of a company by company endeavor. And that, of course, makes sense because companies are in control of their own supply chains. But at the same time, we won't solve living income challenges, you know, one company alone. So we really want to emphasize the need for strong governance action, right? To reach changes at scale, to reach farmers with especially vast income gaps, but to also to look for changes at the sector level. And from what we have gathered, right, how to engage governments is not necessarily a component of companies' living income strategies to date, right? Companies are focusing on where they can lead, but we also encourage them to look how they can influence other actors. And the same is true when engaging with each other, right? There are no easy solutions to living income challenges, right? It's a complex issue, and we have a lot of learning to do, all of us. And we see not necessarily the type of learning culture right now that we would like to see, right? We don't see a lot of information sharing. We don't see a lot of insights being shared, including about the failures, right? I would argue there's a lot of projects that have not worked to raise farmer incomes. What can we learn from those? What should people not repeat? We are launching right now a learning review here in Ghana in the cocoa sector, inviting companies to share their lessons, to engage on us on what we are learning from living and what's actually working and what's not working. And so if there's any companies participating today that would like to participate, please reach out. I'll leave it here. I hope this was a useful kind of kickoff to this meeting, and I pass it back over to the panel. Thank you.
Okay, now we are back in Amsterdam. Let's see whether, yes, we are back in Amsterdam. Just for people who just tuned in, we are right now in Amsterdam at the Fairfood office in Amsterdam. As I said, it's the first Living Wage and Income Lab session of 2022. And so we had Uwe. I will have a conversation with 3 of our guests here. And if you have any question, whether for Uwe Or our guests, please go to the chat and send your question to us, and please address your question to one of the speakers. So let's start with Paul Schoenmaker, Head of Impact as Tony Chocolonely. And Tony Chocolonely, everybody knows that, but just mentioning a front runner approaching living incomes in cocoa supply chains. And after listening to Uwe, could you please tell us the most important issues for Tony Chocolonely when it comes to implementing living income in cocoa supply chain?
Sure, thanks. I think the presentation of Evo was very interesting because I also see that there's more and more attention for living income, and that is needed because poverty is the root cause of the problems in cocoa supply chain and actually many others. And that leads to extreme exploitation. We know that more than 1.5 million children work in cocoa and over 30,000 victims of forced labor. And addressing poverty is key to solving that. What we do as Tonys, we create awareness about this issue. We lead by example and want to inspire others to act. In the field, we've implemented a different way of sourcing cocoa through 5 sourcing principles. So we have fully traceable cocoa beans. So for all the chocolate that we sell, we know exactly that it comes from the partner cooperatives that we work with. Then with those partner cooperatives, we work to strengthen their organizations. Like Uwe said, farmers are usually the weakest link in the supply chain, but together they can stand stronger. So we help their organizations to also reinforce. Then with them, we engage in long-term relationships for a minimum of 5 years. We will guarantee that we'll stay with them, invest in their organization, and buy their cocoa beans at a higher price. And then through them, we
Excuse me, higher price than what?
Exactly. So I'm going to look at that. We're gonna
2 more points. Okay.
2 more points. So the fourth one is that we work on increasing productivity, so that farmers can grow more cocoa and thereby also increase their income. But then still, that's not enough to get into a living income. Already in 2013, we noticed that just paying the Fairtrade premium was not enough to get farmers out of poverty. So then we started paying more and give ourselves a challenge, figuring out how much more is then enough. Yeah. Exactly your point. And I'm glad that working with the community that is worldwide engaged in this topic, we were able to publish for cocoa, the Cocoa Living Income Reference Price in 2019, which is actually the price that an average farmer household would need in order to enable or to earn a living income. Yeah. And that's what we pay for all the cocoa that we buy.
Yeah. Okay. I will later on. I will ask you, and it goes for you, all of you. What are the problems you are facing, and whether these problems are have been amplified by COVID or not? Is it just a glitch, or is it something to stay with us? But let's go to Lotte Kak, Sourcing and Development Manager at Fairtrade Original. And Fairtrade Original practices have always been the internal DNA of the company, and coffee is one of your main products. Living income coffee is a priority at Fairtrade Original. If you think about your journey to achieve living income in coffee, what resonates from what Uwe just said?
Thank you for the question. I think what resonated me the most is that he mentions the fact that there's a lot of interest in the topic of living income, though there's a lack of commitment. And looking at our journey and thinking of how do you commit yourself to a living income is really, it starts with looking at it as a human right. I mean, we're talking about decency. We all want to establish a decent livelihood. So why shouldn't we work on decent livelihoods for the farmers that we work with? So I think really looking at living income, integrating it in your due diligence policy is really important. Make it part of your procurement, like you mentioned as well. And I think that's something that we started with, and also we changed our mission into enabling our farmers to achieve a living income. And I think it really starts with that kind of commitment. And then how do you start your journey towards paying a living income to your farmers? What Uwe also mentioned, it's a sector action that is needed. So really looking at partnerships, looking at frameworks. For instance, the framework of Fairtrade International really helps to calculate a living income, but also partnerships or sector level action like this living wage lab really helps in finding out how you want to really start that journey and how do you get to that living income for farmers.
Yeah. By the way, when I was just getting prepared for this session, I looked you up, and one of the first things that popped up when you Google you, when someone Googles you, yeah, I Googled you, was the fact that you had a dream. You had a dream for the coffee world.
Yeah.
In 2013.
Yeah.
Would you please tell me that dream?
I think I know which movie you're talking about.
Yeah.
I think, well, my dream in coffee would be that farmers actually earn a living income, and in that living income, so much more is integrated. It's price, it's income, it's decent livelihood, but it's also being able to take care of the environment and being able to invest in sustainable production.
2013.
That's my dream.
Yeah. So it's only 8 years.
It's only 8 years, so it's a lot of work that needs to be done.
Yeah.
So let's get started.
Let's get started.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go to Monique Moy, marketing coordinator at Eosta. What is Eosta?
Eosta is an international distributor of fresh organic fruits and vegetables from all over the world, and we import and export. But it's also that we have, it's not just selling products, but we always want to give the message, to do something good for the farmers, and we do this also on a sustainable way. We have this trace and tell system, so we want to keep the chain transparent from the grower to the consumer. For example, on our pineapple label, we have a code so the consumer can look it up at the computer and see where the pineapple comes from.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exact farm.
Yes. So
exactly.
Then they can, for instance, chat with the farmer like, oh, I like your pineapple, and continue the good work. That's what we see.
Cool.
Yeah.
While you're talking about that, you are already delivering 3 living wages products to shops. We are talking about mangoes, avocados, and passion fruit, and it's quite unique thing, that to do that unique example. And I would like to know from you, what do you take into account when starting a living wage project?
Yeah, for sure. We have some projects ongoing, real life, for about 2 years now. So we see that it works, but you need to take some steps before you get into action. And I think the most important is that you have a good relationship with your supplier, because they need to be very transparent. We need to know what do the workers earn, and what is the living wage, what do they need. So we at Eosta have a relationship with our farmers for many, many years. So that's how we can count on each other. There's a relationship of trust, which is very important to start with.
But trust is not enough.
No.
Is it like black and white on paper?
Yes, of course.
Okay,
yeah,
good.
But it's also a relationship. You can trust each other, and you visit each other, and you know what's needed.
Okay. By the way, Paul, you are nodding. Do you recognize this issue of trust? What's that for you?
Absolutely. So the direct relationship with suppliers is key to organize something like this. I mean, big commodity markets that exist for coffee and cocoa, but also for lots of other products, actually kill the connection between the producer and the consumer. And without that connection, it will be very hard to feel empathy and therefore urgency to work on solving the issues.
Wow, we are talking about hard business, earning money, living wages, and now we are talking about empathy.
Yeah.
Thank you. Please go on.
It's also the connection should be short. The chain should be as short as possible, because the more intermediates you have, the more complexity to get to the living wage project. So that's very important, and of course be like-minded with the grower. They should also take care of their workers and take care of the world. Go for the organic fruits and vegetables and the social aspects. Yeah, and what I said, they really need to be transparent because we need to have an overview of the salaries of all the workers. Otherwise, we can't make the right assessment.
Yeah.
So, but it can be very complex to calculate the gap, you know, between the living wage and their income, because there are so many aspects you need to count with, and for all over the world, it's different. In every country, every region, there's a different minimum wage. So yeah, for one, it's easier to calculate than the others.
So, by the way, you mentioned a couple of minutes ago, you mentioned something about maybe you should living wages, maybe it should be a human right, considered as a human right. And now you are mentioning something else on a higher level, minimum wage in different countries. Maybe we should get it all together, that like minimum wage in Holland and in Belgium and in Denmark, it's almost the same, you know?
Yeah.
Why can't we do it for other countries or other countries? Are those things that you are engaged in? I'm looking at starting with Lotte and going to you, or is it something that totally not related to your work? It's like it goes beyond my hat. Het gaat boven mijn pet op.
Yeah.
Of zoiets. Yeah.
I think it's a combination. Yes, it goes above our head a little bit because we all need each other to make that happen. But of course, you can play your role in that. And next to that, I think legislation, new laws are very much needed for this. Yeah.
And do you want to add something to it, or should?
No, I agree what you say. We can't influence the minimum wage, but yeah, if you pay attention to it, maybe we can reach something in all countries.
Cool. Okay, but by the way, now I'm just seeing at my tablet that 150 people are watching us. So, and as I said earlier, please don't hesitate to send us your questions, address your question to one of the speakers, whether here or to Uwe, and my colleagues will select a couple of questions and send it to me in about 15 minutes. Okay, let's go on. What interventions do you use to raise the income of farmers or farm workers, and how do you prove that the money reaches their pocket? Let's start with Lotte. I have two questions, you know?
Two questions, yeah. Talking about interventions, I think for us, it started with creating the new mission, like I just mentioned, really making it part of your procurement. Then there's the matter of, so what is a living income to the exact farmers that we work with? So profound research is really needed. So we follow Fairtrade International's research on living income reference prices that really looks at the farmer's context. What does he or she need to earn to achieve that living income? And we also take part of that research with the farmers that we work with. That is pricing. We commit ourselves to paying those living income reference prices. So we really can make sure that for the coffee that we buy, we pay the right price. But then also, like was mentioned before, with by Uwe, for instance, it's also really needed to work on other interventions like productivity, decreasing of cost reduction and diversification. So we search for a lot of partnerships, for instance, the Future Proof Coffee Collective, a collective of coffee brands in the Netherlands, working on living income. We use our own development budget, but we also look for external funding for additional projects. We recently started a cocoa agroforestry project, for instance, in Colombia, for those farmers that are attacked the most by climate change, so they can also earn an income, additional income from cocoa, for instance. And we do more of those projects. So we really look at pricing, but also other interventions to make sure that you can actually reach that living income, at least for the part that you're responsible for. And then coming to the second question, how do you trace what is the impact of all this?
Money-wise.
Money-wise.
Do they get it in their pocket?
Do they get it in the pocket? So the Fairtrade living income reference price really looks at what is the farm gate price. So it really sets a price that goes to the exact farmers. There's multiple way of tracing that in the future. Hopefully there will be auditing, for instance, possible, but also working with notebooks, farm records, really following, did the money get to the farmers, but also how does it impact them? Not only the additional price, but also the projects and the initiatives that we take.
Paul, the same question or questions for you, we can combine them.
Yeah. So
interventions.
First of all, good to realize that in cocoa, we're actually not talking about wage, but income. These are all small entrepreneurs. And household income is quite complex, but it's roughly the amount of cocoa that you produce times the price. Right? So everybody can make that calculation. And the price is actually the quickest one. Right? You just pay more. That has a direct effect because income goes up. Nothing complex about that. And we also see that. The other one, the volume part, takes longer time. It has to do, like what you said, with increasing productivity, helping farmers to grow more. And that takes a bit more time. But we do see, and that's a matter of having the right measurements in place, that the effects are there. Every year, we take a quite big sample of all groups that we work with to measure how many people are escaping poverty. And we do see a very clear trend in the effect of that. And it's not strange if you realize that we currently in avocados pay more than 50% over the farm gate price. So that has a big effect for farmers to deliver to us. Okay. Another one is that we cannot control what farmers do with that extra money. They are part of a cooperative, and together they decide how they want to spend it. And that's a good thing, right? I also don't want you to tell me how to spend my salary. It's their money, they have to decide. But it could be a difficult choice whether you want to invest in your cooperative or in your own family, right? Because we have that solidarity feeling, and we realize that, and we ask a lot of extra things of cooperatives, for traceability and these productivity programs. That's why we decided that on top of this living income price, we pay cooperatives for their costs with a cooperative fee. And of course, the programs that are needed, we pay also in addition to that. So we don't say you have to pay that from the premium, but we have a separate budget line for that, where we invest in those programs.
Okay. By the way, now I can see at my tablet that there is a question for Uwe. I will pass this question in a few minutes to Uwe. But for now, the same question for you. As I said, the interventions to raise income for farmers or farm workers, and how do you prove, how do you trace that the money reaches the pocket?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's the difference, I think, between what we're discussing, living income, living wage. We work really with the workers at the pack house, for example. You have all small farmers, but we take care of the living income for the workers who work at the packing house of the supplier. And we do the intervention that starts with the premium model. We call it the premium model. So first we have the salary assessments. And then we know the standard living income by benchmark, so we can calculate the gap. What should be the living income? And we reach this as long as we know how many kilos do we take from this supplier, because then we can calculate the premium per kilo that goes to the workers. Okay.
And the question about how do you prove, how do you trace that the money reaches the pocket?
Yeah, that's of course all arranged, on paper. Yeah. And for example, our avocado, we calculated that it costs us 2 cents more per avocado to make it a living wage avocado.
2 cents.
Only 2 cents. Yeah, per avocado.
That's almost nothing.
Yeah, true.
So, excuse me. We have COVID and I have
Yeah.
Okay, so only 2 cents. So let me go to the final part for this session, because as I said, we already have a question, and maybe Uwe would like to join us with his questions. What are the challenges that you are facing right now in order to achieve your goals? What are the problems? And maybe lessons learned, something, now we did that project, how naive we were, So tell us, because as you know, we learned the most about the mistakes you have made, not about the sunny, shiny stuff, but the dark things. That's what people that give them a little bit of kind of direction. So let's go with you. What are the challenges?
Well, I think our main challenge is to have the retailers with us. To have the people who want to buy this avocado on the living wage base. Yeah. We also have the mango, then you pay 5 cents more. That's another gap. Yeah. But we can take the whole volume and we pay the living wage price, but we give the choice for the retailer. What do you want to buy? Do you want to buy this included, living wage included avocado, or do you stick to the non-included? Yeah. So the 2 cents less, and you don't take care of the living income for these workers who worked so hard for your product.
And just to get it clear, when we are talking about the retailers, let's talk about our situation in Holland. We are talking about Albert Heijns and Aldi and Lidl and Dirk van den Broek, those shops.
True.
We are talking
this is the first step you have to go through.
Yeah.
To get enough volume to sell the product. And
enough retailers to walk with you.
Yeah.
So now you recognize the problem. And I just wonder, what's your solution for this? Because when you acknowledge a problem, the solution, you can take the solution.
Yeah, I think it's important to keep communicating about this subject, to keep it on the higher level.
On the agenda.
Yeah, on the agenda, to make people aware that it only differs, that's only 2 cents, And as long as the consumer doesn't know, I think we learned that the consumer would like to pay 2 cents more. Yeah. But as the retailer not always wants to go with us, or not yet, they are not ready, because one of the other problems is that there's no certification yet for living wage. So, that's another point.
Yeah. Okay, now I get your problem. I understand your problem and maybe the other issues which are related to the problem. And I would like to ask you about what's the importance of the certification to tackle that problem. But first, I want to ask Lotje the same question. What are the problems you are facing to achieve your goals?
Well, I think, and it's also similar to what Monique has been saying. It's how can you really reach your mission? How can we make sure that those farmers achieve this living income? And I think, firstly, we cannot do it alone, because we are not the only ones buying his or her coffee. So that also means that the other buyers should also encourage and embrace looking at the price in a different way and really paying a living income price.
Excuse me, you said encourage. Maybe we can replace it with force.
Well,
can we force
if we may,
one way or another,
well,
legally?
Yeah, like I mentioned, like legislation, law could really help. Well, certification could play a role. There's different ways of looking at it.
Continue.
And I think also, like you were saying, Monique, we have the same issue. Coffee is a very promotion-driven shelf. People really look for the lowest price.
Excuse me, promotion?
Driven shelf. So there's a lot of promotions, meaning buying the most coffee as possible for the cheapest price.
Yeah.
While you are in a coffee shop paying $3.50 for your cappuccino, and being in a supermarket looking at the shelf thinking that's way too much.
I don't know which coffee shop you visit when you pay $3.50. I pay $4.50.
Well, me too. Sometimes depends on where you live. But yeah, I do also pay $4.50.
Yeah.
So how can you make sure that retailers actually want to put your product on the shelf, in a shelf that is so promotion driven, and also even if the price is slightly bit higher, slightly bit higher, I wonder if all consumers would actually be able to pay for it or want to pay for it.
So, Paul, what are the challenges you face? What are all challenges, I would say problems you face, or maybe you faced in the past that you tackled, or the things, lessons learned? Yeah.
So consumer pricing is of course also relevant in chocolate, but it's also about redistributing value within the value chain. And we know that for chocolate, it's a luxury product. There's more than enough money in the value chain between producers and consumers to pay for that, even if consumers don't pay a much higher price. So for us, the challenge is mostly about increasing volume. So not so much productivity, but like what you said, we need to make sure that we buy more and more beans. The more beans that we buy, the more impact that we make. But as I told you in the beginning, that we believe in building strong cooperatives. And if a cooperative is fully dependent on just one brand, then there's a big dependence, and that will weaken them. That's why we started with Tony's Open Chain. It's a platform where we invite other chocolate companies to join us, join our way of working, and source cocoa beans at these same cooperatives. We open up our network, our programs, everything we do, so that cooperatives can sell more of their products to a range of customers, and thereby also diversify their risk.
What was the name of the platform you said?
Open Chain. Open Chain.
Yeah. And for other companies to join you, are we talking about the big players who are joining or have joined? Are we talking about Nestle's and that kind of?
So the 5 sourcing principles that we made and drafted are actually designed to be fully scalable. So it's scalable already at Tony's fast growth. We grow between 30 and 50% year on year. It's also replicable. We're proving now with 5 missionaries that have joined our way of working that we can grow even further. So definitely this is a model that can be applied to the entire sector. So also the very big guys, but there are also lots of medium players still out there that are more than welcome to do it on the platform.
And so I have so much more questions to ask you all. I wonder, for example, how do you remember when Tony's Chocolonely first came to Dutch market? I just, what shall I pay 3 or 4 euros for this chocolate? But nowadays, very normal. How do you manage that, for example, to overcome my mental how do you say, hinders to achieve that? But people are watching, they have sent some questions, I'd like to give them the floor. So that's a question for Uwe. And so I will read the question, and Uwe, then we will mute us so he can talk. So Uwe, question is from Gail. Gail of Gael is saying, power imbalance is not just companies in relation for farmers, but companies in relation to themselves and their client/buyers. What needs to happen in procurement practices that perpetuate power imbalances along the supply chain? My God, great question. So please, Rika.
Thank you. And thanks for the really interesting discussion as well. I've been listening very intently. Really great to hear the different experiences and the overlap, right? That I feel like is really there in terms of shared challenges and opportunities. Also great chat questions. I hope we can get to them as well. Really lively chat. On the question, I hope I understood it correctly. But yeah, I mean, power relations within the supply chain and within companies, no easy issue to tackle. But let me just say a couple of things. One, within companies, we do see the constant power struggle between sustainability and procurement, right? And I'm curious, of the panelists, if that is something that exists within their companies as well. We do think that they're not very aligned oftentimes, right? Procurement focused on flexibility, cost optimization, efficiency versus, right, the sustainability objectives. So we encourage companies to create more alignment, either organizationally by combining the two functions or by making sure that procurement is also incentivized through their objectives at a sustainability front. But then across the chain, I very much agree that interesting power relations too. We've been really experimenting with this quite a bit because we've been engaging with retailers, food manufacturers, and processors or suppliers. And our theory was always, oh, it's all top down, right? That it's all very hierarchical, but it's actually not like that. We do think that the processors and traders actually have a lot of power and not necessarily easily swayed by their buyers, because they are also oftentimes in many sectors very few traders and processors, so they actually have a lot of bargaining powers themselves. And at the same time, I totally agree that the retail level is really the one level where a lot of power is exerted, particularly in pricing, and we don't have, I feel like, maybe done enough to really engage retailers, including maybe pressure them through consumer preferences to do more and use their power for good. So yeah, the retail level definitely a key area. Let me stop there.
And now we are on mute. But I just read on my tablet that there are million questions sent to us. Please send your questions. Some of them we can give you answer afterwards, and some of the questions probably they will give us food for thoughts for other sessions. So please provide these questions, and because we still have about 10 minutes to finalize this session. It's a question from Hanneke van Vechel, and she's writing, we are a big agri-food farm in Kenya with over 1,600 employees. We pay 30% more than minimum wage and are interested in living wage. However, we see, that many customers and companies all over the world always look for paying the lowest price. How can we, now you are starting to smile, yes, how can we as a company / sector implement a living wage and get all players involved to make living wage a reality? And she thought maybe that's a question for Monique, but also other panel members can relate to this question. So Monique, let's start with you. And I'm also looking at Uwe. So Uwe, if you want to relate to this, please raise your hand, then I will mute us and give you. But if not, just go on. Monique.
Yeah, I understand the question that it's a topic we are working on as well, you know, living wage is part of the true cost of food. I mean, and that's what has to come to people's minds, to the retailer, to the consumer as well. That it's always said that, for example, if we compare the organic food to the non-organic, people say, yeah, organic is way too expensive, I can't pay that. But if you calculate all the costs, you know, for the poisoning of the water and the biodiversity, if you take all those costs, then the price of organic isn't too expensive. Then non-organic is way too cheap.
If we take that into account, but one way or another, they don't do that.
No, but that's I think
that's
our responsibility to make people aware of this calculation and to show what is going on in this world.
But can we go a little bit further? Now I'm looking at you and maybe at Uwe, to make that if practical. Maybe they should calculate those impacts, you know, like CO2 or other stuff into their price. If yes, how we can do that? Help me, because we don't do that.
We have a model for it in the true cost of food. A model, you know, we calculate what is the price we pay for this poison they use and the water.
Okay.
Or the people who work with the chemicals that get sick, you know.
But you do that.
Yeah.
As I said, the other people, the other companies, they don't do that. One more time. How can we, as a company sector, implement living wage and get all players involved to make living wage a reality? Asked Hanneke. Now I'm looking at you.
So we have to look at pricing of food in a whole different way. I mean, we're so used to food becoming cheaper and cheaper and cheaper.
Yeah.
Right now, there's a debate about rising inflation. People are super anxious about it, and rightly so. But if you realize, if you zoom out a little bit, we're in this part of the world, super wealthy, generally well educated. There's enough money here to pay for food, at least enable a living income there, and we have to take that responsibility as companies, as retailers, and then again, setting that point, it doesn't mean that food will become too expensive for consumers in the Netherlands. because there's enough value already in the value chain. It's also a matter of redistributing it.
Yeah. Okay. You want to add something?
Just to add, I think, you know, for companies or farmer groups that are really looking, how can we work towards like true cost, for instance, look for partnerships. There are so many partnerships within several sectors that are actually already working on this. For instance, the Future Proof Coffee Collective that we are part of, we also calculate this true cost. And you get access to a lot of information, to funding, etc. So really also reach out, ask your questions, spread the word, and I'm sure there will be people that can help you along the way.
Cool, and tell the story, right? We're talking about 2 cents for an avocado, right? Yes. You cannot tell me that is impossible for people to buy. Okay, for 2 cents more, and it's the same with that. And for this lady with the question, it's also about engaging with your customers and tell that story. I mean, for the price of 1 avocado, maybe 2 cents is, you know, percentage-wise quite a big amount, but in the general picture, this is something that we have to do. It's not a choice, but something that we should do and work on.
Yeah, and it's good if you show the story. You know, if you show them really what makes the difference. Exactly. It really makes this difference, and for us, it's only 2 cents. So. Yeah.
Okay, Paul, you are quite popular because there are 2 more questions for you, and we only have 3 minutes. So please be as brief as possible. It's a question from Sue Giuliani. You mentioned cooperatives earlier. Do you find that cooperatives have an impact on living income for their member farmers? And Sofike Kappers, she said, do a smallholder farmers have shares in Tony's Chocolonely?
Yeah, 2 great questions. So the first one, I really believe that cooperatives are a key part of the solution. Right? As I said, alone a farmer is just too weak to fight this battle against an international commodity market, but together they can be stronger. To the second question, no, cooperatives do not have shares in Tony's. The relationship that we build is strong though, because we engage in 5-year contracts so that they know that they will get investments from Tony's in their capacity and that we will buy their cocoa at that higher price. And that is the connection that we build on.
Yeah, since we are almost finished, but I would like you to look into you know, kind of wrap up. Now we are at Fairtrade Coffees. You know, you are kind of, fair food. So please tell me, what was the takeaway for you for today? What's your wrap up? If you tomorrow talk to other people, what's the first thing you are going to tell them?
The first thing, I think it's great that finally we are talking about this big elephant in the room, and that is price. I remember going to Tony's fair a couple of years ago, and there was one of the speakers talking about pricing, and the whole room was silent. And then I thought, why is it still such a big thing? And I think looking at the changes over the past years, it's great that finally we are more open, more transparent, and more aware and discussing this issue of price. And I still think there's many other things that need to happen, but price is definitely very important in this journey towards living income, living wage.
Okay, now we are going to, I'm going to wrap up. First, of course, you 3 of you, thank you so much, thank you. But we are going to wave to Uwe as well. Uwe, thank you so much for being with us and for your presentation. And I hope to see and hear you more often. And finally, as I said, it was the first session, and in the course of the year, we will have more sessions. Please send us your questions and your remarks to improve our sessions. And this session today, you know, wouldn't be possible, of course, without our technicians. They are behind the camera, Eva and Marie, and of course, for the 4 speakers, and Rika. Thank you so much. They are all behind the scene. Rika, and a special thanks for me, you know, for the 2 people who made this possible and gave me all the information. Isa Mirales, we saw her in the beginning of the session, and Mariana Boroitman. Thank you all. And as I said, thank you all participants, all the viewers for your participation, and go in peace. Thank you.